like 5 or 6 years ago, I just became really bothered by the idea of writing a conventionally notated score that was kind of fully composed with every part dictated, and that being a piece, it like both artistically it didn't feel especially interesting to me, and also I guess politically, like it bothered me to um be prescribing what everyone does in that way. And I guess I just became interested in what is a very rich tradition of alternative ways of score making and composing and making music with a group of people. And yeah, I guess I was at a quite conservative institution, having quite a conservative education about what composing is. And so really the composition tradition that I was exposed to was very much a European modernist,
Sure.
plus kind of world. And so
More
I just,
quantifiable, right? I mean, this is the thing about it. It's quantifiable in a
yeah,
way.
yeah, and I just got really interested in the kind of uh both the aesthetic results that you get from a more open scoring, but also just the kind of social, political kind of possibilities and implications of um getting people involved in reacting to a score in a different way than if it's like Western common practice notation, I suppose. The kind of symbols and the visual, the language of Western classical notation, because there's still sounds that I like, and I guess I still care about controlling the kind of sonic output of a performance
Sure.
like to some degree, sometimes, and that varies from piece to piece. But I really like giving that when it's appropriate, I guess, like giving that as a one thing to draw on amongst several, and the other things that are in my scores might be more open-ended, or like not they don't have a clear interpretation in the same way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is probably why I was so attracted to what you were doing, because I mean, this is very much how I think about it, and as a way of kind of removing hierarchies as much as possible, but still maintaining a signature of some kind that still it says that it's been made by a person.
Yeah, and I mean,
People, but
yeah, and I mean, I'm still a composer, and if I didn't think that I, I think it's a complicated thing. Like I'm still choosing to write pieces that people play. Like there is still obviously a hierarchy there, and also I think it was really difficult for me to unpick this for a while. But I think to be a composer, you have to have some degree of ego insofar that you have to think that like what you want to write is important enough for other people to want to play it. But like I guess for me it's about a relationship with those people, whether it's like I actually speak with them or whether that's just through what my score looks like and what it represents to them. But it's, I guess, inviting people and their kind of subjectivity to creating a sound together. And also me aside, because most of the time I'm not playing in things that I or singing in things that I have written. I guess it's facilitating the group of people who are performing to make some kind of language of interpretation together within themselves. And I guess that sometimes can facilitate really kind of rich and interesting things within that group that is, I guess I'm kind of making scores that invite it or facilitate it, but it's also like not to some degree not about me. And I guess I find that interesting and kind of like cool and exciting and good.
yeah.
And I mean, I love a lot of kind of Western art music that is fully notated in a conventional way. And um, I guess I really had a period of feeling very angered by it and thinking like if you just kind of press playback in Sibelius and then real people doing it is kind of just like that, like what's the point at all? And
Yeah.
I don't think I think that anymore, but it's still just not really what excites me. And I do still care about my pieces as like aesthetic objects, both visually and sonically, but just in a slightly different way, that it's not about knowing what it's not about controlling pitch and
Right.
rhythm basically, and
Right.
then just and then seeing how that is, then and then observing and experiencing the nuance of that when done by live performers. It's like it's just a different thing. It's just a really different thing.
Like creating an environment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's very much what I get from it, and what I've seen, and very much how I try to approach this kind of you know, ensemble playing, and is what is the sort of space that we're going to create that's
Yeah,
being evoked by what we're seeing.
and like especially like this score has color in it, and that's like a very kind of, in some ways, a very blunt tool, because it like doesn't have a direct like kind of interpretation. It's like very like explicitly open-ended, if that makes sense. um
Yeah.
Also, I've done pieces recently where people have to move around, and like these are just kind of simple mechanisms, but they really like make it a social event, like the
Yeah.
performance, and mean that there has to be a lot of kind of communication, whether that's in a break or like non-verbal communication in an interpretation of something, and a lot of listening, just in a way that is different to kind of conventional like chamber music making. And I guess as a performer, I love doing things like that, and I I like love performing kind of open scores, and that definitely also informs what I find interesting about that as a performer, and what I find interesting about, or like beautiful, or kind of compelling, or strange about those kinds of performances, is what informs as well my composing, I would say.
So just, I mean, the color of this particular score is definitely, I mean, it's very evocative. It's probably how I got to that word. Is it just really kind of comes off the screen in this really powerful way. I mean, that's a choice. That's a really specific choice. Is
Sure.
that something that you'll you're willing to tell me about, or is that kind of a?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't. Uh, I can't really remember where, because usually when there's colors in my scores, they come from somewhere. Like
Uh-huh.
how usually when there's melodies, they come from somewhere, like they're stolen. And usually when there's colors, honestly, this was one of the earlier scores that's like this. Um, and also it was, I'm now, this is kind of a side note, but I'm now on bean piece like 9 or 10. I'm making these pieces that use these beans, and they're purple.
Oh yeah.
This is a pre-bean piece. Um,
Okay.
this is a pre-bean piece. So like the graphics don't come from the beans, and now almost all of the time when I do graphics, they come from the beans. And these graphics come from like words and letters, like written, handwritten letters and things. Um, and the um the colors are just like, I had used them in a previous score as well. I kind of am obsessed with orange. I like have a thing about orange.
Yeah.
So like it's got this like very bright orange, and also this is it's a relatively early graphic score that I'd made digitally. I do that also now a lot, but previous to that, I'd been really experimenting with like doing it with physical media and then just scanning them in or whatever.
Uh,
So also the kind of block saturated color that is like very simple and very like like a digital aesthetic, that's also was fairly new in
yeah.
my practice at this time, at the time that I made this score. But I mean, I was just really, I also when I was undergrad, I did this research project about a Claudia Molitor score, which is all of these really beautiful, like soft pink colors. And that made me really interested in pink, and pink in graphic scores, and um these colors that are like not, that like have kind of like layers of signification.
Right.
And I guess that, and I also, the bright orange and the soft pink just like are complementary colors, and that using this like very consonant visual, like pleasing visual language, was like something that was interesting to me as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
um and I like so the way this score's been realized before was that I gave it to people and they responded to it, and I also gave it to my sister who's a dancer, and she responded to it, and also it's based on a poem the writing that the graphics come out of is based on a poem that my sister also wrote. So she's
Mm.
dancing in this video piece that I made of this, which is from the score, but also she wrote the poem that inspired the piece in the first place. So
Mm.
um
Is that what we hear in the video?
yeah, the words that yeah. So that this was me being like, it's all kind of like, you know, self-constituting. But that, I guess the mood of the poem is like this kind of soft, glowy, like nostalgic
Mm.
thing. And I mean, I've done a couple of other pieces that use the poem, and they also use this the kind of pink color, actually, now I think about it. So yeah, it's the like I have the bean pieces and I have the pieces based on this poem by my sister, and there's some pieces of both actually. So it's in the universe of that poem, and I ask her sometimes if I can do another piece based. I'm actually going to do another piece based on the poem, like a setting for a folk ensemble, and she
Some-
just like rolls her eyes and is like, again, because also when she, you know, when she wrote it, she was like 17 when she wrote it, and I don't think she cares for it anymore, but I just really like it and I'm kind of obsessed. And,
some
um,
point she's gonna want some
I
kind
think
of,
also I find something,
sorry, she's gonna want some remuneration.
yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, sisterly love, I guess. Yeah. Um, all those times she's crashed on my sofa, you know. Um,
Right, right.
uh, yeah. But sorry, that was all kind of a big tangent, but yeah, I guess the visual, I guess it is kind of to some degree just an emotional thing, just like how any composing is. Like it's a very kind of personal and also like intuitive to whatever degree that's possible thing that's based on what's inspiring the piece and whatever. But yeah, the colors, I still am interested in using color in score, and at this time I was really interested in the kind of openness that color affords and how it's very, very personal and subjective, how that gets interpreted, and obviously how it's something that isn't in a conventional score and what that means.
Yeah, yeah, and it does have, you know, signifiers to certain things, but you can't
Yeah, for sure.
necessarily. I mean, there are obvious ones, but there are
Mhm.
also unobvious ones, and that seems like part of the thing for an interpretation is to find your own pinkness,
Yeah,
and
for
what
sure. For
um
sure.
I have seen some of the other, I guess, more recent scores, I suppose, the Bean ones, but the sort of I'm looking at it over here because my laptop's here.
Yeah.
Um, but the sort of um, circular linear shapes, that seems like I feel like those kind of make their way into the more recent ones too, correct?
Yeah. And I mean, the circular, like blobby shapes in the more recent ones are from the beans, but that was also drawing circular shapes was something I was interested in before, just because, again, I guess often in graphic score interpretation, it becomes like kind of what would this shape be if it was on a stave?
Mm.
Um, which is kind of fine, but like also not necessarily what I find the most interesting all the time. So I guess the circular shape again is just like a really simple mechanism just to be like, you can't follow this line because it's a circle.
Hmm.
So like you can't read this left to right. So like what else, how else might you like attack this in terms of making sound that somehow represents it?
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense, and it is interesting to see how. I mean, it's one of the things about graphic score practices is that you can. There's always a kind of evolutionary aspect to it that is very fascinating to witness, in my experience. Um, the video, I know the video was something kind of particular, um,
Hmm.
that's not, or I shouldn't say I know. It seems as though the video is something very particular, and is one interpretation of the score. Is that a
Yeah.
statement?
Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Maybe you can just talk about the video for a brief moment, and
Yeah.
because I mean, it's I was just kind of revisiting it and was realizing that I mean, it really is kind of a manifestation, a visual manifestation of a visual score in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a COVID thing. So, like it was partly a response to not being able to do conventional, like, a chamber piece that people play in a concert hall. But it was the first, maybe not the first. I basically just was getting really into making video scores, and I'm kind of really grateful for having been forced to, because now I do them quite a lot and I really love it. And I find it to be
Mm.
like a very like compelling medium, especially I guess because the scores I make are so visual, and then it's another visual medium to work in whilst also being like predominantly concerned with sound. Like I just really enjoy it and find it really, fulfilling and whatever. But anyway, the I also had done a piece with dance a little while back from this piece and really enjoyed that. And then my sister had written the poem and she's a dancer. And also um also the images in the score. So the score has like line drawings and kind of these blocky images, but also it has there's also kind of analog photographs in the score, and those were taken when I was a first year at uni, so they're like old pictures, and my sister was then, at the time that I was making this piece, studying in the same place that I did my undergrad. And so then when she filmed herself dancing, it was in like the gardens in the same place that the
Mm.
photographs come from. So it has this like, again, nice kind of like circular thing kind of visually. And then the score, some of the visuals from the score are used in the film. And then I also am in the film a little bit, like doing weird movement stuff. And even though I'm like not a trained dancer or anything, and then the sound is from people interpreting the score and then me kind of cutting that together. Um,
Mm.
and it kind of becomes this, like, how I think about it is it's like, um, I give people a score, to like an open score, and then they interpret it, like do whatever, however much kind of improvising they want to do from the score. And then I have this like kind of like a sample library, and then I kind of like digitally make music out of it, but it's from this like very rich, interesting, weird kind of sample library of fragments of melodies and harmonies and stuff. Um, and that's again become a way of working that I use quite a lot now. Um, but this is the first piece that I really did that was like that.
Mm.
And so when you hear melodies like overlapping, they weren't recorded in that way or performed in that way or practiced in that way.
Sure.
So yeah, that's what the video is really. It's a way to interpret the score that is, I guess, just my weird methodology that became what made sense at the time, and
Yeah.
um felt like a way for, I make a score and then I give it to people and then I like make a kind of object, I guess, out of what they've given me. And I
Yeah.
guess it's this like, again, like reiterative, like interpretive process for making,
Making sense of the nonsense of COVID in a way.
yeah, and like for making some kind of end product, which could really have been like lots of different things, and this is just like what it happened to turn out to be in that context, in a way.
So people did solo recordings and then
Mm-hmm.
you mixed it together.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely. I kind of intellectualize that, but it definitely feels much more uh it's very unified for that being the way it was created. It has unification to it that was okay, that's it's really pleasure to
Mm-hmm.
experience. Wow. You see me looking kind of pink right now?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a truck outside
Uh,
that is fuchsia
huh.
and direct sunlight is on it. I'm gonna have to expand myself out here. Oh no, didn't work.
Yeah, it looked like there was some kind of, yeah, big stained glass window. Yeah.
And there it goes.
Yeah.
Amazing. um, I think that I will probably have some questions for you
Sure.
later, but maybe not. I mean, this is all has brought a lot of kind of rich information that I was looking for into how we'll kind of deal with our interpretation. And I mean, I'm definitely going to have everybody watch the video and listen to the
Okay.
video, because I feel like it's just another piece of information that we
Yeah, yeah.
can bring into it.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's probably, I mean, I was wondering if you had thought about that, and this being a potential situation that people will inform how their performances might be informed by seeing the way that you interpreted it in this video's context.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's like fine, and like doesn't have to be how it is, but it's also fine. Like, you know, it's open. Like it
Yeah,
is, you know, whatever, however it's done every time is like context dependent and depends on the people. And you know, if watching the video or not is another piece of context, like that's fine. And I mean, it's just very cool that it'll be done by a bunch of people that I have never met, I guess, and like
yeah.
in a really different way. And I guess in like a more like in some ways in a more conventional like score interpretation way. But
Yeah.
that it's very cool, and it will just be like a different thing. And you know, it can be structured however you want. And yeah, because it's,
uh,
you know, it's so like there's nothing that specifies anything about like, I guess, the framing of an interpretation. So
yeah, so there's like, this I think is my final question about it is, I mean, do you have a composerly idea about ways of moving from page to page, or is that really sort of up to us?
I mean, I think it's up to you. I there's all sorts of things, you know, you could do. Like, I guess I was thinking about it. You know, there's like, I mean, a recent piece that I did had different groups. I don't know how many you'll be. They had different like like scores around the stage, and people move and perform a score for a bit and then go and perform another score for a bit. You know, you could do that.
Yeah,
There could be like a really straight ahead version that is like in like someone is doing one of the pages the whole time, and then everyone else, and that's like a background, and everyone else moves through the other pages one by one. Like, you know, like it's very open. And
interesting.
I guess me saying both those things implies that maybe something that isn't super linear is more what interests me. Um, but I don't mind.
Yeah,
Interested to see, and like
no,
to see what feels good with this score. Yeah.
yeah, but exploding it in that way, if I can use that word, is helpful actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think like seeing it less, because each page I don't want to be something really that feels like it's being read like a, you know, left to right kind of read, I guess. It's
it's not a
more,
treatise piece.
no, it's more just vibes.
Yeah,
So so I guess thinking about a performance to whatever, you know, obviously a performance is linear, but to insofar that it's possible to think about ways to interpret it that are not like so um start to finish, I think is
yeah,
uh interesting maybe.
yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much.